Hi guys, and today we're going to try and make something out of this little toy I picked up at a car boot sale and turn it into a little terrain piece or a diorama piece. I'm not exactly sure at this stage, but it's pretty cool. It's got some nice little details on it. I like the panels. I'm not exactly sure where it's from. Maybe it's a G.I. Joe or something, but scale-wise it sort of works. So to begin, we're going to take just a piece of wood I had kicking around in the studio, just an offcut and some polystyrene. Again, just some rough bits that I had lying around in the studio. And this is going to bring the level of the floor up a little so we can try and make something a bit more three-dimensional. Now we're a little short, but we can patch that up later. It's not a problem. Now I've got a slightly thicker piece from my collection, and again just trying to decide on how we're going to make things work, or try and come up with a solution to our little problem here. And I think I sort of wanted it to skid in and maybe have hit the rock and deflected around a little piece. So I think that's what we settled on. So we're just marking out a few sort of rough shapes. And this is my favorite stuff here. This is the Gorilla Glue wood glue. Brilliant for sticking down all manner of things. And just make a nice, good Jackson Pollock little pattern here. And then just we're going to stick a few things down. You don't have to worry too much at this stage. You can work while it's still wet. Bonds and grabs pretty quickly. I think about sort of 10-15 minutes it starts to set. But for what we need here, we can very quickly just build out a structure. And part of the reason why we use polystyrene here is because it not only saves a lot in cost, but saves a huge amount in weight. Just gives us that bulk to work around. And again, just using a few offcuts just to make a kind of canyon shape here. And yeah, just seeing how she goes. So we've got a little bit of a hole here. I don't know, it's maybe incomplete part of the toy or something. I'm not exactly sure what was originally supposed to go there, but in our case, I'm going to try and just patch it up a little bit with something. So take a piece of card, cut a small circle about the diameter of this little bottle cap that I had somewhere, or cap of, I'm not exactly sure where it's from. But yeah, I kind of like the shape of it. The sort of profile of it was quite cool. And then I've always got a selection of little rubber seals that I keep. They're fantastic for using as little details that you can just add in somewhere. So I'm just putting a small piece of glue on the underside around the rim, and then use the card to affix some glue to the rear, and then just tack that in there. And then we'll just drop the rubber insert inside, and once it's all dry, I think that works quite well. So here's a quick little way of getting some really nice rock formations. I'll just take some tin foil and crease it up a little. And we're going to take some plaster, just mixed up to the directions. It's not rocket science, it doesn't matter if you go a little bit more or less with the water. And just loosely pour it in, trying to get the mixture into some of those deeper crevices. And then once that's all dry, you can crack it off. It makes some really nice, interesting, random shapes. And in this next section, unfortunately, the camera card filled up, so I lost some footage, but basically I've just hit it with a hot wire cutter, just taken some of the edges off, try and made some very rough mountain shapes, and just piecing in some offcuts. Cut away with a sharp knife in several areas, and then this central area, I carved out a sort of trough to break up that flatness of that sort of landscape that we've got there a little. Try and give it a bit more variation. And with a hot glue gun, we're just sticking some of our plaster shapes that we cast up on. And these can be pretty random. They don't need to be all too specific, but just find pieces that work well with the shapes that you've made and see what works. And now we've got a fantastic recipe for some homemade sculptor mold thanks to Luke at Geeks Gaming Scenics. I'm sure you're all aware of him by now, and I'll pop a link in the video description below to his full recipe video. But in short, it's dampened toilet roll, dried in the oven, and then mixed 50-50 with some casting plaster, and then just add some water. Now I found this mix to be fantastic to work with. It's really lightweight, holds form really well, and gives a really nice texture initially that you can smooth down with some added water if necessary. And you want to mix it to this sort of cottage cheese type consistency. And then it's time to have some fun and get your fingers dirty and apply our mixture. And just get right in there, slap it on, push it into all those little nooks and crannies and crevices. And you can see here we really begin to define some of the shapes, working around some of the plaster work that we put on, and just generally having some fun with it. And if you've got any questions about any of the techniques I'm using, or just generally want to get involved, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. If you'd like to see more of my videos, of course, feel free to subscribe, and if you like what you see, throw us a little like as well. Always helps. And then we're going to take a tool and just gouge out some skid lines where our spaceship may have crashed. It's really easy to do while the sculptor mold is still wet. And here you can see the texture once it's dried. And then we're going to mark out exactly where we plan to do our damage, where the collision would take place. I'm just using a pair of tin snips here. And I was surprised at how rigid the plastic was. I thought this process would be far more easier, but it's actually more difficult than I expected to cut and break this piece apart. But with some persistence and some diligence, we can always achieve our task. And now, let's get ready for some destruction. If you need an extra tool to aid you in your quest to destruction, this triangular file works fantastically. Now let's get back to that destruction. Pretty destroyed to me. The next stage is everybody's favorite, is good old masking. We're just using some regular masking tape to cover all the exposed plastic areas to avoid any overspray when we come in a moment with our airbrush to apply some primer to the model. And I decided to try and keep this plastic in reasonably good condition because it was there. I thought, why not use it? And it's worth taking your time at this stage, covering all those areas. And I think we get a thumbs up. Yep, there we go. And this is my go-to primer at the moment. It's from Vallejo. Dries pretty quick. That's what I had to hand. And we're just covering things with a pretty even, but reasonably thin coat of primer to begin with. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit patchy in places. We're just trying to get it into all those recesses and gaps in between the panels. It's amazing how just with a light coat of primer, the whole model already begins to look completely differently. If you've got any questions about airbrushes or how to use them, please feel free to leave a comment below. I'll try and get back to you as honestly as possible. In the beginning, airbrushing can be quite daunting for those who have less experience, but you'll get there. And then we're going to take some wood adhesive, aka PVA. Any PVA glue will do, some general white glue will do, just anything cheap to hand. Then mix it in with some water and then apply it liberally all over the model. And what this will do is it will give us a brilliant waterproof seal all over the model, which will act as a waterproof barrier between further applications of paint and other materials that we apply further down the line. Now again, just apply this all over the place. You can't have too much at this stage, and just get it all in there. And once that dries, we take some very expensive soil from the backyard and just give it a liberal sprinkle over everywhere. You can see my little ghetto homemade sieve here. It's just some fencing wire that I had to hand. I didn't have a sieve to hand at the time. We're just going to sort of try and just give it a nice thin layer of light particles. Then we're going to take that same PVA mixture, put it into an atomizer. These can be bought from most garden shops, and just get this absolutely everywhere. And once we've done that, we can come in with a second layer, just to beef up some of that texture. Oh, and we're going to start placing some rocks. I'm just using the spaceship now as a sort of bit of a guide as to where everything's going to go. We're just popping in some rocks, and then we'll give these a really good solid coating of PVA once again. And once all this is dry, this will lock everything nice and tightly into place and keep everything from moving. And now comes the fun part, when we get to do some painting. I've just mixed up a light grey here, using some wicked airbrush colours. Fantastic, really like to use them on all manner of applications, and it's again just really what I had to hand. So we're just gonna come in here and just really lightly just mist in. You can see how lightly the application's going on. Again, it's not rocket science, it's just a light touch will do you well here. And we're just getting a sort of reasonably even, but not too even coat, if you know what I mean. We want some colour variation and some variation of tones. And for any of you eagle-eyed folk out there and think, oh God, what airbrush is that he's using? I've got several airbrushes, and this one happens to be actually one that I've Frankensteined together out of several different airbrush pieces. I think the body originally is a very old airbrush. It's the first airbrush I ever got, actually, maybe 20 years ago, by a company called Hansa. It was sort of mid-level at the time, but I was very young and lost several pieces of the actual airbrush, and as I got older, my brain grew a little. I realized with some experimentation that several parts are actually able to be interchangeable from company to company, and um, with a new needle and a couple of other little bits and pieces, I was able to Frankenstein together this sort of real workhorse of an airbrush, and I just use this for smashing on lots of colour. It's pretty dirty and grimy, but gets the job done. Once we've got that sort of white in there, we're just going to come in with a sort of darker, almost charcoal black colour. Just begin to do some sort of dagger strokes. Get that feeling of speed and exhaust and collision. And it always helps to pay to think about the scene or the scenario that you're trying to recreate and just let your imagination run wild. It always surprises me how at the beginning of a project, you may be struggling for direction or not sure quite where this is going to go. But always as you add some paint, things start to take shape and one idea leads to another. And that led me to this, where I decided just to add a little bit more visual interest. I'd add some red acrylic paint to some of these panels. I'm just working thinly, staying within the confines of the lines, and just kind of making it up as I go along. And now we're going to come in with some silver just dry brushed over the top, just to give us that effect of chipped paint and grinding metal. And this was one of the main reasons why I was so attracted to this toy to begin with. It was the level of detail that they managed to find on the exhaust pipes. I thought it was really cool. And this next step might seem a little crazy to some people, but we're going to use an oil wash. And to do this, we're going to take some black oil paint. Any brand will do, and it's just what I happen to have to hand. And we're going to dilute it much in the same way we would with acrylics, but instead of using water, we use white spirit. In America, I believe it's called mineral spirit. We're going to create a really translucent, heavily diluted wash and just slather this all over the surface of our model. And what this will do, this will sink into all those deep, dark crevices, give a really nice definition between the different panels, and also add a little bit of grime and general scuzz overall. But the main reason why we use oils in this case as opposed to a water-based wash like a Nuln oil or something like that is that oil paints stay workable far longer. And the advantage of this is we can use a little bit of spirit to just come back in and slowly remove parts of those washes that we've just put on. Now you can be quite abrasive here. As you can see, it takes a few passes to really get that paint to start to lift. But once it does go, you can really see how much paint we're actually removing from the surface of the model. And you can really see how we're taking full advantage of the benefits of working with an oil-based product, really stretching out that working time, taking our time to reveal as much or as little of the surface as we need to. And with a little chip of paint, but we can patch that in a later stage. Now here you can really see the wonderful variation in tone and color. But after all our careful masking, we had a little boo-boo. But again, we can fix that in just simple touch-up. It's not too obvious. So now we're starting to place the actual toy into our scene. I'm just loosely measuring it up and just going to dot in a little dab of hot glue just to keep it in place for a moment. And a firm press should keep everything in place. And for this next stage, we're going to use just a sharp implement to re-scratch some of those skid marks in as our spaceship came crashing down from orbit. Then we're going to use just a wash, water-based wash. There's no need for oil washes here because we don't need that extended working period, or we don't need to be able to reduce the amount of paint we have on there. So we just want to slap this mix on everywhere. It's a pretty simple mix, just made up with some black and brown ink mixed together with some acrylic medium and some water. And I use this for most of my painting when I'm not using an oil-based wash. It's pretty useful. You can make up a large batch of it. We're just getting this to soak in and stain some of the colors to make a little bit of variation. We're going to take some grey paint into our Frankenstein airbrush. We're just going to come over the top of our wash, and again just to break up that visual texture a little, get some more stone coloured paint in there, and just try and break up the sort of monotonous colour that we have and bring some sort of more rocky colours into it. Now the benefit that we do have is that because we use the natural soil, we do already have some of that colour variation. There's no need to go overboard and completely lose all of that, but just with some careful application we can really change the feel and nature of the setting that we're trying to create. We're just going round and just try and cover up some of the lighter areas. I'm going to add some black into the mix now. I use these little shot glasses just to mix my paint in beforehand. It allows me to not waste so much paint and reduce the paint down pretty correctly and thinly, and then we're coming in with a even darker tone to just try and sketch in some of that explosion, how we think the spaceship might have really impacted with this alien landscape. And then we're going to use just some black chalk. It's important that this isn't the oil variety of chalk, oil pastel. But this is just a regular soft pastel. And just by scratching it over the surface a little, we're able to create some of that really dusty and sort of ashy, detritus carbon effect that one might experience with a really big explosion. And you can really see everything starting to take some shape now. Now, to add a little bit more visual interest, I felt the rocks were a little bit sort of grey and monotone. We're going to give everything a good coat of our trusty PVA mixture. We're just going to come in and top sprinkle some of our soil again. Doesn't matter this time if a few larger parts add to the mix, little bits of sticks and stones and leaf detritus. We're just going to sprinkle back on top, and it's this layering effect that we employ that really knits and binds everything together. And again, there's no real rule to this, it's just going with feelings, going with what looks good. And to set this all in place, we'll give it another healthy coat of our PVA mixture and just really soak that, let that dry, and we'll be good to go. Now, up until this point, if I'm honest, I was still undecided whether I wanted to make a terrain piece or a diorama, hence why I kept the edges reasonably rough. I decided to make a diorama in the end, and so what I did is I took some pieces of scrap wood and loosely traced the outline along the edges, and then with some glue and some pins, just fix this to the edge of our model. Now, yes, this is several steps back, but the creative process is not always straightforward sometimes. And it just goes to show how versatile this way of working is, that even when you do make mistakes, pretty fundamental mistakes, I might argue, that there are still many ways of going back and correcting our mistakes. So what we've done is we've just filled in the edges with some Sculptor Mold, and now we're just sealing these again with our trusty PVA mixture, ready for some more topsoil to be sprinkled. And again, we're just sprinkling this on, coming right to the edges, getting in all those little gaps, overlapping a little bit here in places. And again, I can't overstate the benefit of using natural products. It gives you so much color variation and texture, but most importantly, it's free. So, here we are. We've come to the end of this journey, and I have to say I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. Is it perfect? No, far from it, but I've definitely learned some valuable lessons along the way. Because it is in our mistakes that we learn the most. And most importantly, it's provided me with an outlet in these crazy times we live in. Now, I don't confess to be any kind of expert, but I enjoy making things and have a ton of fun doing so. I hope that maybe you've learned something along the way, or been inspired to do something like this yourselves. If you'd like any further information on any of the topics covered in this video, please leave a comment below. Now, in this video, I've taken an old broken toy, bought at a car boot sale for £1. It was probably destined for a scrap heap, applied some imagination and a little craft, and turned it into this. Like I said, we've taken an old broken toy and turned it into something that now proudly sits on my mantelpiece. Any of these techniques can be applied to many different projects and applied in so many different ways. The key is to not let your fears and worries about screwing up get in the way. Allow yourself to make mistakes, gain the knowledge, and take the experience with you into your next project. If you'd like to see more videos like this, let me know. And until next time, I wish you all a wonderful day.